In my never-ending quest to try out every single miniature wargame under the sun, I've been doing a pretty good job this year. Idols of Torment, Drop Fleet Commander, little bit of Quar, Blood and Plunder, Fallout Factions, Infinity. And speaking of Infinity, one of the managers at my friendly local game store is getting into a little game called Warcrow. Now, I've heard of Warcrow because it's made by the folks who make Infinity, which is a game I very much like. I've been working on my Pan-Oceania collection. Every wargame does tempt me, but if I know somebody who already plays it, it's kind of a done deal. I got the starter box. Song of the Dormant. Dormant. I don't know why, that's just what it looked like to me before I read it properly. Now, usually Sean and I will go halvesies on a box like this, and then we both like the same faction, and so we flip a coin for it, and inevitably Sean wins. But Sean has not seen this box yet, and so I get to pick, and I'm gonna do the bad guys. This box is the Feudin versus the Scions of Yaldabaoth, and everything else you need to play. This is the new starter box for Warcrow, available for pre-order now. Each faction has some heroes and some cannon fodder. The heroes I'm really keen to work on is Uric, Servant of the Architect, a multi-armed monstrosity who was once a normal man. The other hero are elves known as Breaths, who manipulate the magical fog that follows around the Scions. The sculpts are top-notch, and these are really detailed models. I ended up assembling them all. I'm gonna need the whole crew when it comes time to play. I've got these guys all built and they need some bases. The box came with a bunch of 32s, and I could do like classic fantasy, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grass, but I feel like these guys are too nasty to stand on bases like that. I wanna do something a little chaotic, and I think the best choice is gonna be to use some of the extra resin cast bases I made for my Dark Eldar. Uric is standing on a tactical rock, so I glued this down, making a flat spot of the base out of some cork, and then I tore off some small triangles and glued these down over the rock to make it look like the same shape and texture as the rest of the base. He's actually kinda smooth and soft, so the jagged base provides some nice juxtaposition. Moving on to Breath, she also has some nice softness in the fog that she's floating over, and I want to blend this into the base, so I need to extend the smoke. I glued her down to some 1/4-inch cork to lift her up a little bit, and then I took some stainless steel mixing balls I had lying around and glued these down. I squished some milliput in between the model and the mini to smooth this part over, and then I looked through my collection of odds and ends looking for some more balls, and I found these glass nail art beads and I squished these down into the milliput. Now that I have the detail extended in these new shapes, I smeared Tamiya plastic putty all over my balls, and then I used some plastic glue to soften the putty and smooth it out so it matches the sculpture of the smoke. I used up the rest of my milliput, smoothing the cork on Uric's base, and I used some Tamiya plastic putty to further smooth and make the cork match the slate rock that's on the rest of the base. Then I grabbed the Citadel skull sprue and hacked off some skulls. I sprinkled these onto the base, then I used some texture paste to build up material surrounding the skulls so that they were integrated into the base, like they've been here a while. With the bases done, I threw a black prime over everything, and now I'm painting a new faction for a new game, so I get to make a lot of decisions that'll affect everything. I think instead of a basic white zenithal, I want to start out with a more dark base coat. I sprayed purple from below on everything, and then I switched to a white paint and sprayed this from above. This is like a zenithal, but I was a little bit more careful to highlight specific muscles and details. This white is a primer for the real color, red. I took a red ink and sprayed this over the white so that it covered it all. This color will show up incredibly strong over the white, but doesn't cover the purple very well, so it'll darken a lot in the transition between the two colors. Red is a really hard color to paint with, so I think letting the airbrush do the heavy lifting will help a lot getting these minis done in a timely fashion. The white and red paint are ink layers, which tend to be a little bit fragile, so I gave all the models a satin varnish to protect them for the rest of the painting. I've got the Scions of Yaldabaoth all ready to go. Right now, I'm really feeling Breath the Elf and Uric the Red fella, but I think it was important to get all of them done at once. Even though I'm not working on these suckers right now, it was still good to get them ready to go because it's actually not that much more of a time commitment to put together base and base coat like 5 or 6 guys versus 1 or 2. And now that they are ready to go, the next time I'm in the mood for some painting, I don't have to be like, okay, I got some time to get out the cork and milliput. I can just grab a brush and this guy and get to it. Right now I'm gonna do this guy. For Uric, he's already red, but I want him redder than red. The only way to achieve this is with highlights using something other than red. I started out painting some red mixed with white, but it didn't give me as much saturation, so I switched to a straight yellow and did many small scratchy highlights on each of his muscles. I did another layer of highlights with light yellow, doing some very small dots in the corner of each highlight to really make him look shiny. This made him look incredibly vibrant, but also very orange. I planned for this though. I went very hard on my contrast because I knew I wanted to knock it down later. I took some very watery red paint into my brush and then I glazed this over everything. This blends the orange and yellow highlights, smoothing them into the airbrush red. Now the muscles are looking much more subtle and natural. I came back in with just a little bit of yellow and I applied some final small sharp highlights. His skin is looking good, now onto the other details, like this fellow's horns. I base coated these with brown, and while I had the brown out, I threw this onto his spine too. Then I mixed in some of my yellows and started to do some scratchy highlights, painting a little box around each segment of his horns. I mixed in more yellow and did some finer lines, following the middle and edges of his horns, and then I did some highlights of white. A lot like his skin, I feel like these highlights got away from me, so I took some earth brown and glazed this over the horns to tint them a more saturated brown color. Then I did some final highlights using this new color mixed with yellow and focused on the sides of the horns like they're catching the light. I'm really happy with the colors now, but I want a little bit more contrast, so I dipped some black panel liner into the cracks of the horns. With the horns done, I moved on to his jewelry. Since he's so simple, red and brown, I decided to add some blue onto these elements to help them stand out. I mixed up a purpley blue and then highlighted, mixing warm white to brighten this concoction up. I did something similar on the knives. I dropped the blue and instead used just black and white, glazing thin layers of paint to build up a gradient. These are his little stabbing knives. I've got this guy pretty much done, and I feel like he's calling for something else, and I think that something else is gonna come from the jar. Now, that jar that he's cradling is actually in the lore a jar of his blood from when he was an unaltered flesh and blood man, and he carries it around to remind himself that he's no longer weak and will never be weak again. Now, the problem is I've painted him red, and I feel like a red jar on a red guy is not gonna add too much, so I might change things up just a little bit. I took some green into my airbrush and super carefully sprayed it around the jar. Maybe he left the blood jar at home today, and today he's carrying the toxic fart jar. The airbrush gave me the start of some green object source lighting, and I base coated the jar with a brush, and then I took a neon green color and applied some smaller highlights, letting some of the previous green show through in the recesses. I also painted this onto his chest and fingers to make it look like the jar is really glowing. I did some very small final highlights of a light yellow on the hottest, brightest spots of the jar. I love how the jar is looking, but the rest of him is looking a little bit too even. I put some purple into my airbrush, flipped Uric upside down, and then sprayed him from below. This transparent purple speed paint tints the color already on the mini and makes him just a little bit darker, but since it's purple, more saturated. Uric is now done, and I think my hypothesis was correct. It needed that glowing jar. It added another color to this color scheme, and I think it was really important, especially on this guy who's just a big sea of muscles. But now I can take this color scheme and try to translate it onto the next mini, and that is a very different mini, Breath the Elf. The way she's painted on the box, she's very nice looking, perfect smooth blends with nice light colors, and that's fine. But I want her to be a little bit more of an edgy dark elf. I started out reinforcing my airbrush layers using purple and red to sharpen them. I want all the fabric to be red and all the hard stuff in the trim to be a gray. And to make this gray, I mixed purple with some ice yellow and slowly started layering this up. I hid her headdress, shoulder pads, and all the trim of her cloak, working in small scratchy highlights until I was working with pure ice yellow. Once I had her headdress done, I decided to make all the little symbols of her hat with red. These symbols remind me a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! I made them red because I didn't think the model was calling for any other colors yet. I'm keeping my palette simple. For her hair, I used black as a base coat and then mixed in my ice yellow for the highlights, painting on some small lines in her hair. Then it was time for her legs, and here I felt like I needed a new color. I grabbed a dark saturated red beige. I base coated her legs in this color and then mixed in ice yellow for a highlight and sketched on the highlights, running lines up her legs. These lines are way too intense, but I wanted them down as a guide to help me get everything more natural looking. I went back and mixed some in-between colors and started laying these down in between my shadows and the brightest spots. After these in-between lines, I took my original color and glazed it on, using it to soften the layers. And in between these glazes, I put on my original highlights back down to keep some spots like her knees really bright. After enough fussing, these legs were looking pretty good. Breath the Elf is coming along nicely, and I've been keeping my palette pretty simple. And this is usually my approach when I'm working on a new model. I don't have a lot of experience painting red, chaosy, magic fantasy guys. And so I don't know any tricks yet. I can't expand and reach for every tool in my toolbox because I don't know what's gonna be effective. But what I do know is gonna be effective is a limited palette of colors and then brute forcing it. When I'm working on something like my Black Templar, I just know everything because I painted hundreds and hundreds of them and I know exactly what I want. And so I'll use like 30 different colors to paint a relatively simple Black Templar guy because I know. I'll use like 4 different colors of yellow to get yellow because I know I want a yellow with a little bit of orange, but I don't want to mix it every time. I want a yellow with good coverage for the opacity, but then I want a yellow that's a little bit more transparent for glazing. I want a yellow that's a little bit more white so I can do the edge highlights. And so I just can reach for those different colors because I know what I want. But for a brand spanking new model that I've never painted before, I got to experiment a little bit. I got to put on a brush stroke and then look at that brush stroke and think, I want it a little bit lighter actually. I'll use this off-white, or I want it a little bit darker, so I'll use the purple, maybe the black. Working with a limited palette also helps me out for the next time I want to paint one of these figures because I can use hindsight. I can think, this is exactly what happened when I did it this way, but you know what would have been a big help? Magenta, and I can just add that right into the recipe. I want to use this gold, but not quite yet. It needs an undercoat, so I mixed my skin and my purple and I put this over the chain, symbols, and lantern. True metallic colors are a little transparent, so I want this color to shine through. Then I put on my gold, slobbering this all over. Once I had a nice coat of this, I mixed my purple and black together and then glazed this over the chain, letting it settle and darken in the recesses. This gold chain is her weapon, so I thought I could use a new color, and another detail that is important is the smoke. And just like Uric's fart jar, I thought this should be green too. I base coated all the smoke with green, and I want it to spill onto the base, so I need the base to be finished before I can continue. I darkened the base with some purple mixed with black, and then did some scratchy highlights of purple. Then I put green in my airbrush and spray this around the base and around her cloak, like the green smoke is glowing and spilling onto her clothes. And you know what else spills on the clothing? That's right, our website. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find merch like our EOB dice, wet palettes, water slide decals, and basing toppers and bits. It's also the best way to support us with a membership. Each month, members get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. This month we have the Faraway Galaxy Bundle, a battlefield's worth of sci-fi buildings with a clever removable door and roof system for easy access. These buildings print easy and are perfect for cutting a battlefield into a dangerous urban maze. There's also plenty of cargo containers and barricades, including the XT6 cargo sled, for moving all these accessories around the war zone. This set is perfect for quickly setting up a thematic battlefield on any system, planet, or moon. This set will be on EonsOfBattle.com for the month of July, and then it'll be gone. After the green, I airbrushed on some white over the smoke to catch in all the raised parts, and then I began highlighting with a brush, using a stamping and stabbing motion to lay down some color, and then I tinted these areas green with a transparent speed paint. Now I can keep pushing the highlights, mixing green with my warm white, and I kept doing more and more small scratchy highlights until each little bubble of smoke came to a point of nearly white yellow. With the smoke done, breath is done, and I switched back to Uric, finishing off his base, giving the skull some attention. I highlighted these with purple mixed with ice yellow, and the first two characters of my scions are done. Just gotta hit the rims of the base with black. The first two models of my Scions of Yaldabaoth are done, and I am very pleased with how these guys turned out. I like that they're just a little bit bigger than normal. If there's a game where I genuinely don't need that many models, make them just a little bit bigger so that they're easier to paint. I love these guys, and honestly, I'm probably gonna play my first game before I finish the rest of the crew. It'll be fine, they're built, they're based, they're primed, they're good enough to be dangerous, and then when they come back to the painting desk, they'll be even more exciting to paint, because this won't just be intact number 3. This will be the guy who heroically held down the home field objective all game and managed to whiff every single attack roll he made. Although these guys and gals might look like the bad guys, according to the lore, yeah, they're the bad guys. I mean, there's something to them being the underdogs in a collection of outcasts and misfits, but they're also nailing arms and legs to each other and participating in dark magic. They're the baddies. But that's okay, because these guys are pretty awesome. There's one guy in here, this guy. I can't wait to see this guy in miniature form because he looks pretty sick. Let me know in the comments below if any of you guys have tried out Warcrow, and if so, what did you think about it? And as always, thanks for watching.